Joe Biden, as measured by most polls, is the frontrunner for the Democratic nomination to go up against President Trump in the 2020 election. Biden is Catholic, but he's a controversial one, differing with fundamental church teachings on abortion. Joining us now to talk about him and the whole campaign is St. John's University's Assistant Vice President for Government Relations, Browne. Welcome, Brian. Joe Biden has said his faith is central to his life, but he refuses to accept the church's teachings about the sanctity of life. He's a vocal supporter of abortion. What's the likely impact of that difference on his chances in the primaries?
Well, in the primaries, he's facing other Democratic candidates, including several other Catholic Democratic candidates who all share his pro-abortion views. What's interesting about Biden is, to your point, he really identifies his Catholic heritage and Catholic identity. That's an important part of his character. And how that plays out on the campaign trail and how he messages that could be a deciding factor for many Democratic primary voters.
If Joe Biden does win the nomination, how would he stack up against President Trump on the issues Catholics care most about?
Well, it's going to be a mixed bag. I mean, Joe Biden and his 40-year voting record, he has been supportive of issues like the rights of the poor, the marginalized, the immigrants, and that's an important issue for many voters of all stripes. Many Catholic voters will also be looking at the Supreme Court nominees, and if you re-elect President Trump and there's a vacancy, what that means for many of the hot-button social issues. So Catholic voters, like all voters, will have to look at the voting records, look at the elected officials, and really cast an informed and conscious decision.
Is there anyone else in the Democratic field that Catholics should be paying attention to?
Kirsten Gillibrand here from New York is Catholic, Castro from Texas, Tim Ryan from Ohio. So they're all, I mean, if you're a real in-tune Catholic voter, you'll be looking at some of their voting records. But I think Catholics will look at many times what's most important to them. Is it social issues? Is it the economy? Is it foreign policy? All informed issues for informed Catholic voters.
Joe Biden harshly criticized President Trump in his presidential announcement video. Senator Bernie Sanders, no Trump fan, has urged a different approach. Let's listen.
I like Joe Biden. Joe is a friend of mine. But I think what we need to do with all of the candidates, have a issue-oriented campaign, not personal attacks.
What's your take on Sanders versus Biden?
Two 70-year-old gentlemen fighting it out. There's going to be real differences, and they both have a long career in politics, and they will cast some of those differences. Sanders has already come out and pointed out issues where he split with Biden, the war in Iraq, free trade agreements, some other votes over the years. But I think what you have is really two big-name, nationally known candidates fighting it out for a share of voters, and anything goes in politics.
If you looked into a crystal ball, who runs against Trump and who wins?
Great question. I think time will tell. I think, Joe Biden has really positioned himself for the general election, but he really has to get through a tough Democratic primary where some people were going to be looking at his voting record. He may not be the progressive thing that a lot of Democratic primary voters are looking for these days. So certainly he's got to make it through the primary first. If he does, then, middle-class Joe from Scranton, Pennsylvania does resonate with a lot of those swing states.
Brian, thank you so much for your time and for your insight.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.